I was born in Europe in a very old time, a time when people thought that bathing was dangerous, cold food was medicine, and anyone who owned a horse became important. I was born into a noble family, and that is a beautiful thing. But the problem is that the family had an older son than you, and he is the one who will take everything: the land, the money, the castle, and even the warm room. As for you, you are just the second son, and that means one thing: you will become a knight whether you like it or not. Everyone looked at you as a small child and smiled a strange smile, saying, "Oh, this little one will be a knight. What an honor." And you would look at them from inside the cradle and think, what is a knight anyway? And do they eat sweets? But the truth that no one told you is that the knight in your time was not a hero like in the stories, but a person who covered his body with iron all day, got beaten daily, woke up an hour before the sun, slept 2 hours after the moon, and smelled bad odors all week. But of course, nan, va. No one told you this because you were a child, and people like to deceive children. The first years passed quickly. You tried to walk and fell, and you tried to speak and said strange things that made the servants laugh. But there was one thing clear. You have no special skills that qualify you to be a knight. You were afraid of the chicken in the yard, screamed if you saw a spider, and cried if you fell on the ground. Yet they proudly said he would grow up to become a strong knight. Your father was a strict nobleman. He always looks at you, shakes his head, and says, "This boy will carry a sword one day." At the age of 5, something happened that changed your life. Your father came in early in the morning and woke you up gently, or so you thought, but in reality, he was pulling you by the blanket and saying, "Wake up, today we start your life as a knight." You slowly opened your eyes, wiped the sleep drool, and said to him in a sleepy voice, "Will we eat sweets first?" Your father looked at you in a long silence, then said, "No." From that moment, the first training began, stopping crying for strange reasons. Of course you failed, but the real training wasn't at your home. At the age of 7, the day you feared came without knowing why. A great knight named Lord Gaston came. A very large man. His beard could be used as a pillow. And his voice was like the scream of a creaking iron door. "What?" he said to your father. "Why, I will take the boy today." Well, you stood behind your mother, trembling, and said in a small voice, "Where to? Are we going on a picnic?" The knight laughed a strong laugh that made the birds flee and said, "A picnic?" "Yes, a very long trip." Almost 10 years. Your mother held your face in her hands and started crying, and you didn't understand anything. Until that moment, you lived in a big house, who slept in a warm bed, ate delicious bread, and played in the yard. But today, all of that ended. The knight mounted his horse and seated you behind him. You felt your back break from his strength. Your mother waved and your older brother, who by the way was smiling with a bit of happiness because you were leaving, and he would be rid of your annoyance. Then the journey to the new castle began. The road was very long, the horse moved powerfully, and your head bumped against the knight's back every minute. In the middle of the road, you said to the knight with fear, "Sir, can I go back to my mother? I forgot my toy." He looked at you and said seriously, "From now on, your toy is the sword." You asked him, "Is the sword soft?" He said, "No." You arrived at the castle at sunset, and when you entered, you realized that your previous beautiful life was just a short holiday. The halls are cold, the wind whistles between the stones, soldiers shout, and the smell of the stable immediately assaults your nose. A large man pointed to you and said, "This is your sleeping place." You looked and found a very small mattress on the ground with 5 mice looking at you. You asked fearfully, "Is this my room?" The man said, "Yes." You asked, "And the mice?" He calmly replied, "Your neighbors." Thus began your first day as a little follower, a nice title that in reality means a small servant without pay. Your tasks were very many. Carry water, bring the sword. Clean the shoes, clean the tables, clean the stable. And after a full day of cleaning, it was... A huge knight comes and tells you to polish the saddle too. You say to him, "But I just finished." He yells in your face, "You well done. Polish another one." And so, I learned an important lesson in the castle. When someone says good job, they mean there's more to do. At night, you were trying to sleep, but the rats were fighting next to you, and one of them dragged a piece of bread from your bag. You whispered to it, "That's my food." The mouse looked at you without remorse and ate it. Long days passed, and every day you discovered something new. Life is not easy, and the people here are very strong. The food here is so tough it could be used as a weapon. The horse dislikes you for no apparent reason, but despite all this, you sometimes smiled. Especially when a kind knight passes by and says to you, "Well done, boy." A small word, but it gave you enough strength for a whole day. By the end of these years, you had changed. You grew a little, your strength increased, and you got used to the cold, hunger, and shouting. And inside you, something new began to form. Something very small, but important. A desire to become a real knight, even if you didn't understand why yet. The years responded to you very slowly. You grew. Your body started to lengthen a bit. Your voice began to change. And you started to feel something entirely new. Something very painful. One day, when you were 14, you woke up and said, "Oh, my back hurts, my leg hurts, my hand hurts, even my ear ear hurts. Why did the knight in charge of you laugh and say, "Well done, you are starting to grow. Pain is a good sign"? I looked at him and said seriously, "And what is the bad sign?" He said, "To die." And so, a new phase of your life began. You became a caliph. This title sounds nice, but in reality, it means a servant, though a slightly higher ranking one. It means the same old tasks, but with more yelling, more work, and more bruises. And of course, more knights telling you why you are slow. Move, even if you are moving at the speed of light. At this age, you became responsible for a full knight. This knight was a huge man named Sir Albert. He has a very long mustache that could kill you if he turned quickly. He loved shouting a lot, but he also loved you in a strange way, like a father loves his son. On your first day with him, he said to you, "You are my Khalif now, you are my right hand." So you asked him, "And what do I do?" He confidently said, "Everything." And indeed, you started coughing from the amount of work. You cleaned the stable, polish the armor, wash the sword, help him put on his armor, carry his bag, carry his food, carry his helmet, carry himself. If you could, you walk behind him like a tired shadow. He walks with confidence and pride, not and you walk behind him, stumbling. After that, the real training began. The training was very harsh, as if it was designed specifically to hurt you. Sword training, shield training, horse training, training to scream during battle, training to fall without crying. But the training on falling was the hardest of them all. You fell a lot, a whole lot, to the point that Sir Albert once told you, "You don't need full training." You are already a professional. There was a special training called carrying the sword in the mud. They throw you into a mud pool, and you have to get out while holding the sword. And every time you try to stand, you slip and fall. After the mud comes horse training. The horse they gave you was named Dongfang. It takes a step, then kicks. It stands quietly, then kicks. You look at it with a smile. Sokol. You were afraid to turn to him because he might kick. Once you tried to ride him, but he refused. You said to him, "Please, just this time." He looked at you with eyes that said no. Then he shook his head and threw you to the ground. Nevertheless, you trained every day, grew stronger every week, and gained more experience every month. And even but if the training was painful, there were small moments that made it worth the effort. Like that time you were cleaning Sir Albert's shield. He asked you, "Do you want to become a knight like me?" You confidently answered yes. He patted your shoulder and said, "Then endure, the road is long." It was the first time he said something nice to you without yelling. And when he left the room, you smiled to yourself. It was a beautiful feeling. As the years passed, you started participating in small battles, not large battles. Just skirmishes between two villages or thieves trying to rob the caravan. But for you, these battles felt like the end of the world, not to you. The first time you entered a battle, your hands trembled, you heard your heart pounding, and you felt like your knees would collapse to the ground on their own. Sir Albert told you not to be afraid. You replied, "I'm not afraid. My body just does this on its own." You entered the battle. People were screaming, horses were neighing, and the air was filled with dust. You were swinging your sword left and right. Half of the strikes were in the air, and the other half on the ground. But in the end, you survived. And when you returned to the castle, you were very tired, but you were happy you didn't die. And that night, as you slept in your simple bed, you felt something new. You felt that you were no longer just a scared child. You felt that you were taking a small step towards becoming a true knight. You weren't the strongest person, nor the fastest, nor even the smartest. But you had something more important, a heart that doesn't give up. And so, the years of seclusion ended. Day by day, a very significant date was approaching. A day that would change your entire life. The day you become a knight. You were approaching the age of 21. Everyone who saw you in the castle would tell you the same thing. Soon you will become a knight. You heard the sentence often, but you couldn't imagine what the day would look like when you would wear your own armor. You felt both fear and joy at the same time. One day before the knighthood day, Sir Albert came to you holding a small bag. He said to you, "Tomorrow is an important day. You must fast tonight." You looked at him and asked, "Why? Is it for religious reasons?" He said, "No, because those in the kitchen forgot to cook." He said, patting your shoulder, "Think of it as a cleansing." That night, you sat alone in the cold church. The candles were burning slowly, and the air was very cold, as if the night was gripping you by the shoulders. You were trembling a little, not just from the cold, but from thinking, "Am I ready? Will I die quickly? Will I fall off the horse in front of everyone? Will people mock me?" But suddenly I remembered all the years I spent, all the shouting, all the training, all the falls in the mud, every kick from the horse. You remembered that you endured all of that and did not run away. So you told yourself, "I am not weak. I have made it here. I will go further." In the morning, the priest came and performed the chivalry rituals. He placed his hand on your shoulder. And then the Lord came and placed the sword over your shoulders. You were kneeling and your back was hurting, but you were smiling. The Lord spoke in a deep voice. From today, you are a knight. You felt as if the whole world was pushing you forward. As you stood, Sir Albert shouted from behind you, "Do not fall. It is a shame to fall in the first minute as a knight." Your knees almost betrayed you, but you steadied yourself. An hour later, they took you to receive your armor. Now, the armor was heavier than you expected. When you tried to lift it for the first time, you said, "Is this made of iron or an entire mountain?" But inside that iron, you felt strength. You felt ready for anything. Not a single day passed until the herald came. He was shouting that there was an attack near the border. That meant one thing. Your first battle as a knight would begin today. You were not yet accustomed to your armor, nor to the title of Sir Knight, nor to the new weight on your shoulders. But you mounted your horse, or rather, you tried. You climbed with great difficulty, and as soon as you sat, the horse said, "Have mercy on me." You patted its neck and said, "If I die today, you will be buried with me." The horse looked at you with eyes that said, "Then I will throw you off first." The small army moved toward the battlefield. The soldiers were walking in silence. The air was cold and the sky was grey. You could hear the sound of their armor clashing, their breathing, and your own heart pounding in your chest. Sir Albert approached you and said, "The first battle is always frightening." You asked, "Will the fear disappear when I grow older?" Dari yes, he said as he tightened his horse's reins. "No, and more, and more, and no, and no. But you will learn how to fight despite the fear. You nodded and hoped it was true. When you arrived, the ground was full of mud and water. The enemy stood on the other side, shouting and banging their spears on their shields. As for you were thinking, "I want to go back to the castle. I want my bed. I want warm bread." But there was no way back. You heard the army commander shout, "Prepare." The horses charged, and their sound was like thunder. You gripped your sword so tightly that your fingers turned white. Suddenly, you rushed into the battle. Shouts and blows, the sounds of clashing metal, mud splattering on your face. You felt the whole world shaking around you. You struck with your sword on the shield of the man in front of you, and the force of the sword made you scream. "Oh, my hand." But the man fell, perhaps out of fear, and not because of your strike. Sir Albert passed by you shouting, "Hit harder," you shouted. "I'm trying," he said. "Don't try, do." So I struck again, and this time, I actually hit a man. It was a very strange feeling, frightening, but it gave you courage. Then came a moment you didn't expect. A huge man attacked you, and raised his sword above his head. You thought it was your hand. You quickly raised your shield, and his sword came down on it with force. You screamed in pain, but you pushed with your foot and struck him on the leg. The man stumbled and fell. You couldn't believe you did that. You said to yourself, "I'm alive." "I'm alive, Nase." Then you heard someone shout, "Watch out." You turned quickly and another man was jumping towards you. At the last moment, Sir Albert appeared and pushed him away. He said to you panting, "Don't look around too much. This isn't a theatrical performance." You said, "I was celebrating that I didn't die." He shouted, "Celebrate after the fight is over." Minutes passed like hours, and finally, the enemy began to flee. They ran away, and the air was filled with dust and screams. You were breathing heavily, your hand trembling, and your face covered in mud and sweat, but most importantly, you were alive. The army sat down to rest. You sat on the ground, took off your helmet, and looked at the sky. You said in a weak voice, "I survived." Sir Albert sat beside you and said, "You did what you had to. You didn't run away. You didn't fall off the horse." This is a great achievement. You said you were close to falling. He said, "I won't tell anyone." Then he smiled for the first time in years. But despite your survival, your life as a knight didn't end here, as the coming days were filled with other battles and new pains. You thought chivalry was glory and heroism, but slowly you began to see its reality, constant fatigue. Endless fear. As you progressed in your 20s, every battle taught you something, and every fall made you stronger. Every cold night told you that the journey was not over yet.